Rehan always thought too much. If someone didn't return his call, he imagined the worst. If he made a small mistake at work, he replayed it in his head 100 times. Even on weekends, when others relaxed, Rehan carried invisible weights. He smiled on the outside, but inside he was tired. Tired of his own thoughts, tired of worrying about things he couldn't control. One day, while walking through a local bookstore, he picked up an old book. The title caught his eye: How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. He flipped through a few pages and saw stories, real people, real problems, and the ways they had learned to breathe again. He didn't expect much, but something made him buy it. That night, instead of scrolling on his phone, he read. One line stayed with him: live in day-tight compartments. Don't open yesterday's door, don't unlock tomorrow's, just live in today. The next morning, he tried something different. He made his bed slowly. He ate breakfast without checking emails. He walked to work and noticed the sky for the first time in weeks. He didn't worry about the next meeting. He just focused on the moment he was in. At first, it felt strange. His mind still reached for the usual worries, but each time it did, he gently pulled it back. Just today, he would say to himself, just this hour. In time, he began making small choices that brought him peace. He talked less about problems he couldn't fix. He started journaling at night to empty his thoughts. He spent more time with people who made him laugh. The world didn't change, but something inside him did. Rehan still had responsibilities, deadlines, and challenges, but he had learned something most people forget. Worry steals the present while promising control over the future. And once he stopped chasing every what-if, he finally started living the life in front of him. One evening, a young man sat quietly on a bench in the park, his eyes staring at the ground, shoulders heavy with stress. An old man walking by noticed him and gently sat beside him. After a moment of silence, he asked, "You look worried, son. What's on your mind?" The young man sighed and said, "I don't know how to stop worrying. I think about everything, my job, my future. What if I fail? What if people judge me? It never ends." The old man nodded slowly and said, "I understand. You see, we worry because our minds wander too far. We live in two places that don't exist right now, the past and the future." The young man looked puzzled. "But how can I stop thinking about those things?" The old man smiled gently. "Long ago, I used to be just like you. I worried about what had already happened, things I couldn't change, and I worried about what hadn't happened yet, things I couldn't control. My mind was always racing, and I couldn't sleep at night." He paused, then continued, "One day, I realized something. Most of our worry comes from trying to control everything, but we can't. We can only do what we can today, right now. The rest is not in our hands." The young man listened quietly. The old man leaned in a little and said, "We worry for many reasons. Because we fear failure, because we care too much about what others will say, because we feel we're not good enough. But all these thoughts are just shadows in the mind. They grow bigger the more we feed them." There was silence for a while. The sound of leaves rustling in the breeze filled the space between them. Finally, the old man stood up and placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Try to live in the moment you have. Do what you can with it. That's where peace begins." And with that, he walked away slowly, leaving the young man deep in thought, not about tomorrow, but finally about today. It was late at night, and Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was dark and quiet, but her mind was wide awake. Her thoughts kept circling. Deadlines at work, her father's illness, bills to pay. Her heart raced without reason, and her stomach felt tight. She turned from side to side, hoping sleep would come, but it didn't. Morning came, and she felt more tired than the night before. Days passed like this. Sarah started getting headaches. She forgot little things. She felt angry without knowing why. At lunch, she barely touched her food. Her friends noticed she smiled less and spoke less. One day, while walking into the office, she felt dizzy and short of breath. She sat down, scared, wondering what was wrong with her. Later, a doctor listened carefully and asked her about her daily life. After a few questions, he said softly, "You're not physically sick. You're carrying too much in your mind. You're stressed. You're worrying too much." Sarah didn't expect that. She had always thought worry was just part of life, something everyone lived with. But now, she was feeling it in her body, in her sleep, in her thoughts. She realized her constant thinking wasn't helping her. It was slowly breaking her down. The next few weeks were different. She started writing her thoughts down. She took small walks. She talked to someone close. Bit by bit, her sleep returned. The headaches became less. She laughed again. Worry still came, but now she knew how it touched not just the mind, but the whole body too. It wasn't easy, but Sarah had seen what worry could do, and now she was learning to breathe again. Jason was a thinker. Even as a child, he would sit quietly and imagine all the things that could go wrong. If it rained, he worried the roads would flood. If his mother was late from work, he feared something had happened. As he grew older, his thoughts didn't slow down. They only became louder. One day, while sitting alone in a cafe, Jason noticed his hands shaking slightly as he scrolled through his phone. He read a message from work and immediately felt a knot in his stomach. What if he had made a mistake? What if they were unhappy with him? His mind began building stories, each more stressful than the last. He barely tasted the coffee in front of him. A friend who had known Jason for years joined him and noticed the look on his face. After listening for a while, she said gently, "Your brain is trying to protect you. It thinks if you imagine every bad thing, you can stop it from happening." Jason looked confused. She continued, "It's like an alarm that never turns off. Your mind wants you to prepare for danger, but sometimes there's no real danger, just thoughts." Later that week, Jason visited a counselor who explained how worry works in the brain. He learned that the brain treats imagined danger almost the same as real danger. The heart beats faster, the body tenses, sleep disappears, and focus fades. It's a natural system, but when it's always on, it becomes too much. Jason had spent years trying to outthink every problem before it came, but slowly he started doing something different. Instead of answering every worried thought, he began noticing it, breathing, and letting it pass. He still worried sometimes, but it no longer controlled him. His mind was learning something new, not how to avoid fear, but how to stop feeding it. Rayan sat on the bus, looking out the window, but his mind was far away. He was thinking about a meeting later that day. His boss had said they needed to talk. Just those words had been enough to keep him awake the night before. What if he had done something wrong? What if he was getting fired? He imagined packing up his desk, telling his parents, searching for a new job. By the time he reached the office, he was already exhausted. The meeting lasted only 10 minutes. His boss just wanted to assign him a new project. There had been no issue at all. That evening, Rayan told his sister about it, shaking his head. She laughed and said, "You were fighting a problem that didn't even exist." A few days later, Rayan's car broke down on a busy road. He was late to an important appointment. He felt frustrated, but this time, the problem was real, right in front of him. He called a mechanic, explained the delay, and found a way to handle it. As the day went on, he realized something. When real problems came, he could deal with them. He had to. But the imagined ones, those lived only in his head, took more energy than anything else. He remembered all the times he had felt nervous, scared, even sick, just because of what he thought might happen. But most of the time, those things never did. That night, Rayan sat quietly on his balcony, the city lights glowing in the distance. He took a deep breath and smiled to himself, thinking how his mind had often been its own battlefield, and maybe not every thought needed to be believed. Emma had always been a calm person, at least on the outside, but when things started going wrong at her job, delayed projects, tight deadlines, unanswered emails, something changed. She stopped sleeping well. Her appetite faded. Her thoughts kept spinning, one worry leading to another. She started carrying that invisible weight everywhere she went. One evening, she visited her grandfather, who lived in a quiet town by the sea. He noticed her restlessness as they sat on the porch. She told him everything, how her mind wouldn't stop, how she feared losing control. He listened without interrupting, then stood up and went inside. A few minutes later, he came back with a small notebook and handed it to her. He said, "This is what helped me when I was your age. I called it my 3-step plan. Write down the problem. Then ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? Accept it, if you must. Then calmly figure out what you can do about it." Emma looked at him, unsure. But that night, in her room, she opened the notebook and wrote about one of her biggest work problems. She asked herself what the worst outcome could be. It wasn't easy, but she faced the thought. Then, slowly, she listed what steps she could take to handle it. For the first time in weeks, she felt her breathing slow. Her heart didn't race. She wasn't fixed, but she felt clearer. Something had shifted. In the days that followed, Emma used the same method again and again. Not every problem disappeared, but her fear of them began to shrink. And sometimes, the act of simply writing them down made them feel smaller. She kept that notebook close, not just for the formula, but for the quiet strength it gave her. Ayan stared at his computer screen, frozen. An unexpected error had popped up during a project he had been working on for weeks. His deadline was close, and his heart started beating faster. His mind jumped to the worst. What if he missed the deadline? What if his manager lost trust in him? What if this mistake cost him everything? He sat there for half an hour, just worrying. No solution, just fear. Later that evening, he called his cousin Zara, who worked in a different field but had always been calm under pressure. He told her everything. She listened patiently, then asked, "Okay, let's look at this step by step. What exactly is the problem?" He explained the error. She said, "Now, write it down. Just the problem, no emotions." He opened his notebook and wrote, "Unexpected error in final project file. Deadline in 2 days." She continued, "Now what are the possible causes?" They listed a few ideas together. Software glitch, wrong file format, maybe an update issue. Then she said, "All right, now list what you can do, even small steps." He wrote, "Check for software updates. Try opening the file on another device. Contact tech support. Inform manager calmly if needed." Ayan stared at the page. His problem was still there, but now it looked different. Less like a storm, more like a puzzle. He followed the steps. By morning, The issue was solved. The file worked fine after a minor fix. He smiled, tired but relieved. That night, he remembered how worry had kept him stuck, but breaking the situation down had moved him forward. It wasn't magic, just a way to take control, one piece at a time. Lena sat by the window on a rainy afternoon, holding an old photo album in her hands. As she flipped through the pages, she stopped at a picture of herself from 5 years ago, standing outside a university she never attended. That memory came back sharply. The day she chose a different path, the day fear of failure made her say no to something she had once dreamed about. For years, she had carried that decision like a heavy bag, always wondering what might have happened if she had been braver. Every time something went wrong in her current life, her mind returned to that one choice. Maybe everything would have been better if she had said yes back then. One evening, Lena met an old teacher at a small gathering. They spoke for a while, and she finally shared her regret. The teacher looked at her with kind eyes and said, "We all have two lives. The second one begins when we stop wishing we could go back and start living where we are." Those words stayed with her. That night she sat with herself quietly. She thought about the choices she had made. Some were hard, some didn't work out, but each one had taught her something. Maybe she didn't take the path she imagined, but she was still moving, still learning, still breathing. She made a small decision the next day. She signed up for a course in something she loved. It wasn't to fix the past, it was to build the present. With each new step, the weight of regret began to lift. Lena realized she didn't need to rewrite her story. She just needed to stop pausing it. And slowly, the voice in her head that used to say, "What if?" started saying, "What now?" Armand found the old letter by accident. It had been years since he'd seen it, tucked away inside a book he hadn't opened in a long time. The handwriting was familiar. It was from a friend he had once been close to, someone who had hurt him deeply, someone he had never spoken to again. As he read the words, all the old feelings returned. The anger, the disappointment, the sadness. He remembered the sleepless nights, the arguments in his head that never ended, the way he carried that pain in silence for so long. Even after all these years, it still felt fresh. That evening, Armand went for a long walk. The streets were quiet, and the air was cool. He thought about how much had changed in his life, and yet one thing had stayed: the weight of that one memory, that one wound. He asked himself why he still held on to it. What did it bring him now? He remembered something his mother used to say, softly, whenever he felt wronged as a child. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. Back then, he didn't fully understand it, but now, walking alone under the streetlights, he did. The next morning, he took the letter and read it again. This time, he didn't feel the same sharp pain. He felt tired of carrying it. He didn't call the friend, didn't write back, but in his heart, he said the words he had never said before.